instructor Lespina here with Spear Training Group. We're going to do a security and threat analysis of the Ukrainian Job, a jewelry store within the Payday 2 game. Now, it's important to note the entire Payday 2 game is about compromising security and robbing banks and performing heists and stuff. Not going to give you pointers for that, so sorry bank robbers if you're here, this isn't going to be for you. Security professionals, though, where you can harden your security perimeters, this is for you. Now, general baseline rules. This is a video game, so it falls under rule of cool. It is meant to be fun and engaging, so there are a lot of gameplay elements and fun little things that are thrown in there. Those we're not even going to consider in the analysis. We would under some circumstances, but because this is actually fairly... Yeah, there's a lot of RPG elements to it, but it's fairly realism-based, not compared to the other 3 episodes that we did, like in the Cyberpunk universe, where there's augmentations going on, or in the Half-Life universe, where there's teleportation going on. This is going to be fairly ground. Cops and robbers preparation. Now, whenever they make something cool, oftentimes it will be justified under rule of lore on why it works, regardless if it actually does. And what we are going to be taking a look at is making the cool factor more practical and realistic. Now, there are a few different rules whenever it comes to security. Eventually, I will make a better graphic on this. But if we consider that this is a sliding scale from one side to the other. On 0 is no security at all, and 100 is maximum security. What might that look like? 0 security, you can walk in, grab the jewels, no one's going to ask any questions, and you can walk out. You're probably not even going to be reported. 100% security, the jewels won't even be there. You're talking multiple layers of barriers, biometric scanners, dual authentication, more multi-factor authentication, huge amounts of security systems. Now, in the sense of this, the role of this is to be a commercial jewelry store, a facility where you can just go buy some jewels for your loved one. You don't want to go to 100%. You don't want to make this inconvenient for your customers. So somewhere in the middle is where you're actually going to be. Now, this overall security system and layouts and design of the world design is actually not horribly unrealistic, but it does just miss the spot in a few little areas. For example, I would say we're at about 25% right now. We are only going to ramp this up another 25 to 30%. Reason being, we do want it to stay convenient, right? We need it to be accessible to the customer base. Otherwise, you're no longer going to be able to afford all the debt that you're going to accrue from the security infrastructure that you have now. So when it comes to our world guide over here, it's important to note you're going to fall under 2 specific areas or 2 specific rulings. This is going to be the Responsible Jewel Council, or the RJC, or it's going to be the Kimberly Process Certification Scheme, KPCS. There are a few others, but these are the kind of just general guideline ones. And this is really going to be your only concern as far as security goes for this type of industry. And both of these kind of do the same thing. They just want to make sure that you're not dealing in conflict diamonds or blood diamonds, basically diamonds that are farmed off slave labor or the torture and expenditure of other human beings. These are ethically sourced, that's the key word, ethically sourced or grown diamonds. Why might that be a consideration from a security standpoint? Because from a security standpoint, we are here to mitigate not only your physical risk or the damage therein to your reputation or something, but we want to make sure that you're not at liability. We want to make sure that you're not going to be compromised by the legal statutes or targeted by certain malicious groups. In the case that you decide to deal with blood diamonds, you're probably going to be targeted by a few organizations out there which would compromise your security perimeter therein. So that's all we really have to consider on World Guide. Next up we have the National Guide. There's going to be national level considerations for this jewelry store. Again, this isn't going to be a huge amount of stuff. As long as your diamonds and everything is ethically sourced, you shouldn't have to worry too much about dealing with anything on the national level. However, we do have ACES International, which provides great guidance on security postures and perimeters. Hey. You also have the crime prevention through environmental design, which is going to be the largest portion of what we're going to be looking at here, making a logical design and flow to your structure to deter criminals, make it harder for them. That can be an example of something like a single entryway, which we do see here in this jewelry store. Next up, there are specific national agencies, such as the FBI, that give specialized theft programs to deterrence and how to harden against that. And you might even get some insider information as far as, hey, here's how other jewelry stores have been knocked off in the past. Give you some guidance on how to set up your stuff. We're not going to delve too deep into that because that is kind of current industry stuff, and this isn't the place for that. For the most part, the hardening that we're going to see is stuff that you don't really see too often in the game itself. It's going to be in the sense of hardening your structure itself, making your glass not necessarily transparent from the outside, and adding on GPS trackers to your highly lucrative materials, such as the tiara that we see in game, which, if I'm not mistaken, there is a segment of that mission where you can be pursued, which it could be construed that that is GPS tracked, which is a realistic thing.
You better brace yourself. There's a police chasing us.
I got it.
Now.
Similarly, your training programs, there are going to be national level training programs that also go into how to de-escalate during a robbery, what to do during a robbery, and if your employer, the jewelry store, is considering defending itself, they may arm its personnel as well and train them on how to deal with that. Next up, we're going to be looking over the local guide. So on local, this is going to be considering what security guard licensing in DC is. And yes, there are armed security officers in the DC area, and they could 100% provide security services here, to include their security systems and remote monitoring. Now, we see in game that they actually have monitoring on site. That's not necessary. You could actually get monitoring off-site or remote monitoring services. That way they can't be compromised by, say, a gunman wearing a mask, right? So you could do remote monitoring services there. There are pros and cons to that type of system, but it's a possibility. Similarly, with the video surveillance law and privacy in DC, you as a private business owner, and especially a commercial business, have the authority to record things within your business, be it for insurance sake or theft prevention sake or whatever your reasoning is. It's your private property. You do you. However, there are specific parameters that we would look into as far as audio recording. I don't believe there's audio recording in the cameras in game, but I might be wrong. But that can be considered a single party permission or authorization from a single party to perform that type of recording. It's important to note with that, every state is going to be a little bit different. Some states require that you at minimum have a sign up. Some states don't. They allow single party permission, and they can just record on their own and not tell you anything about it. Make sure to check your state laws. We do know that in game they do actually have a sign that says they are recording. So that's actually pretty interesting. It's not necessary, but it does mitigate your threat a little bit, and liability as well. Whenever you tell people before they even enter that they're going to be recorded, makes it harder for them to get upset about it. So it's always a good sign. And the last thing with our local government guide, we know that the DC area in this particular universe is getting destroyed by heists and robberies. So very likely that the DC area police department would be really in tune with these type of facilities, high risk areas such as jewelry stores, banks, and stuff like that. Therefore reducing their response time quite heavily. The general, I'm going to throw a different number out there a little bit here. The general response time to a lot of high threat incidences is about 3 minutes. That is going to change depending on department, jurisdictions, what types of crimes it is, when does it actually get reported, and what's actually said during the report. Generally assume about 3 minutes or so. And in game, they actually respond really quickly, so it could be interpreted that they're either nearby or there are other programs in play that allow them to respond very quickly, such as staging officers in centralized areas so they can respond within a block area. It's a very involved logistical process, but it can be done. Next up, we're going to be looking at our first line or outer protection here. It's worth noting in our outer perimeter protection, we just have clear glass and pickable windows and breakable windows at that. Those are all things that you would prepare against. So one way to do that, one easy way to do that is put a barrier between your glass and the public. Obviously, it's not very aesthetically pleasing, but you can, in lieu of that, get a poly or carbon reinforced polymer glass or material like plexiglass that is shatter resistant. It's not going to be broken by someone just smashing their way in there. You would at least also want to have some type of reflective coating or tinted coating on the glass to avoid peering eyes from seeing into your computer systems, into your business deals and transactions, your private meetings where someone's designing some special tiara for an event. It's just examples. You would want that isolated, not viewable from the outside. But we don't see that in the universe, so we could harden there. That is actually one of the principal areas that we could harden this facility with. Similarly, in some of the renditions, there are gates and fence lines that are blocking us out. Be it that this is in city limits, you can't always put a fence up in an alleyway. Every state's got different ordinances and laws, and every city's got different ordinances and laws. Not going to get into it, but you can't just pop up a fence in your own alleyway. However, if that alleyway grants access to your infrastructure, which we'll get into later, you could request that your utilities company comes in and puts a fence around that utility. Again, circumstantial on a few different factors, but that is a way to harden to make sure someone didn't just walk up and pull a breaker.
It's secure.
Similar to our first line of defense, you would also want to see some general deterrence, such as more obvious signage at everything is being recorded or armed guards on site. A physical guard at the door would also be a pretty solid deterrence, and exterior cameras that are monitoring some of those higher vulnerabilities or higher traffic areas. So as a demonstration here, let's assume we have a couple of different areas here. Let's say my main item, dollar bill, is right here in the middle. And these are entryways into my facility. Zoom in here a little bit. Go ahead and burn our eyes. So, whenever it comes to placing cameras for a deterrence, it makes no sense per se to have your only camera way out here looking off into space. In fact, if you have less cameras, you want to prioritize that coverage to your principal asset. For example, this is our principal asset. Theoretically, it's behind a closed door. I could put my camera inside there, but that is only going to let me know if someone is in there if they gain access to the door. So it would be better to put that camera outside the door, watching the entryway. If I can afford more cameras, I would then want them to watch the next area, entryway into those zones. And then if I can afford more cameras, I would want to have them watching the next layer of entryways, generally working your way outwards. And this is extremely budgetary. For example, Do I want my camera right here at the opening of this doorway? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's a good option to have it in an opposite corner. This way it can't be compromised unless the person comes all the way here or destroys the control system. However, it's worth noting in camera placement, they have wires. Those wires can be compromised from an outside layer. We don't really see that too often in game, or in really any games to that fact. But that is one of the considerations with camera placement. One day I'll go through it, but you see a lot of panning cameras in video games, and panning cameras are not a good idea. There are specific places and times to use them. Generally speaking, you want to avoid using a panning camera, especially if it's a large, bulky rectangle on a wall that is clearly observable on which direction it is facing. If you have those little dome cameras, they're a lot harder to kind of observe, so that hurts a lot less. Similar to our first line, we do see that we have patrolling officers in the back alleyway. That's kind of an interesting choice. That would be a question of whether or not they have the jurisdiction in that alleyway. Does that actually belong to the jewelry store owner, or is that technically an easement? Yeah, I don't know. It's good for security to have security presence. It's not good if you don't have the authority to be there, because it's important to note, say, First Amendment auditors, as long as they're in a public easement or a public area, they can do whatever they want for the most part, as long as they're not actively becoming a threat. A lot of other stuff there. But if that alleyway is considered public access, that security officer can't deter really anything because, well, they're allowed to be there. Yeah, he's a presence, but what's he going to do, right? If you don't have the authority, you can't really address an issue.
Drop your weapon. Took a hostage. That'll slow them down for a little while.
Yeah, hi. I want a large family pizza with pepperoni, cheese, and mushrooms. Maybe a 6-pack of beer.
Just a second. Let me check that. Okay, no, that seems fine.
Next up in the second line, we're going to take a look at the interior of the jewelry store itself. First and foremost, people can walk behind the counter. There are no barriers or anything from keeping them walk back there. The employees don't tell them to stop. The security officers don't tell them to stop. Is this gameplay? Yeah, it's gameplay. But point being, through environmental design, we would want that to be very obviously not accessible to the public. By putting, say, one of those little partition doors that kind of swings up or down, or one of those little swing doors that swings out. Either way, something like that would be a great option. And the glass being able to be broken just by smashing it, that's not ideal. Again, we'd use a carbon-based polymer to reinforce that material. Basically, it's very, very shatter resistant. Even shooting it just puts a hole in it. It doesn't necessarily shatter the whole glass. You can put ballistic glass in these things, but ballistic glass is A, extremely expensive, and B, extremely heavy. So now you have to build your entire stand around that. So putting in ballistic glass is not really going to be the best choice for this type of stuff. I do want to talk about our security camera placement within this room, and I'm going to give a really disgusting artistic representation. So here is the general layout of the main showroom within. We often see a camera pointing out here and a camera pointing out here. This is okay considering they have interlocking fields of view. It's not ideal in the fact that we're not capturing that primary entryway. So having a camera immediately above there and pointed inwards at that door would capture at least a visual of anybody walking in. Is that going to stop them? No. Cameras augment your capabilities. They don't substitute it. But it would at least be a deterrence and something that can gather information that can deter future events. However, if we can only have 2 cameras here, I would actually place this camera right about here so it can view our entryway through the glass and people that enter through, and our other camera possibly immediately opposite of that. So no matter which way people come in, they're going to get a face view of our cameras. Can they go to the back and tinker around back there? Yes. But if we have one of our security officers who's already on post, posted in the rear, that would at least be an observe and deterrence there. More cameras always gooder, but one day at a time, one day at a time. Similarly, we don't see any locked doors or key control access in there. Could be a game design thing, but we would want to have doors in there, especially within the 2 separate offices at minimum. Obviously, there's secure storage back there, so that being in a separate safe is pretty solid idea, pretty good, and having multiple separate safes depending on what you're housing is also not a horrible idea. So good job there. We do still have some exposed jewels in the back, but that's kind of the nature of a jeweler. They're eventually going to need to do repairs and take items out of the secured area. So yeah, they're going to need to have a secured area, but there should at least be closed doors in there as well. Similarly, we might want to angle some of those cameras to look in towards the entryway, as we've already discussed. One of the other things I want to talk about is the security officers themselves. They are clearly uniformed and observable. They're not going to be mistaken as the general public, which there are techniques for that too. But the fact that some of them wear body armor, overt body armor, and a weapon exposed on their hip, that's a pretty good sign and a good deterrence that they are there and ready to deter. And they don't look like police officers. There's a lot of issues whenever security officers look like police officers or they're trying too hard to look too tactical. Maybe we'll break that down one day, but if you're a security officer, remember your lane and your responsibility. Don't try to be more than what you are. You're going to get yourself caught up in a lot more liability than you need to. But these officers look pretty good and squared away. They look capable, and they look like they're within the jurisdiction that they're allowed to be performing within. And what I mean by that is they don't look like some SWAT security officer running around with a rifle and stuff. Do some security agencies have those authorities? Sure. Neither here nor there right now, though. Critical infrastructure. Our exposed electronics boxes on the back of the building are an issue. These can be compromised either directly or indirectly by people just walking in and out of that area. Yeah, we have a security officer patrolling there, but we apparently don't seem to have any cameras monitoring those things. So someone could just walk up and pull a breaker, and now we just lost our security systems or our lighting or whatever it is. There doesn't appear to be any redundancy in the systems either. As far as if something does get compromised, is there going to be generator power? Don't know. We likewise don't see any bathrooms here. This falls under critical infrastructure, but you're required to give amenities to your employees, and there's nowhere for them to go. Do they have to go next door just to go to the bathroom? It's not ideal. But from a security standpoint, that would kind of be considered looking out for liability. That would be a potential lawsuit. We would point that out like, hey, you really need to at least have a bathroom here, unisex bathroom or something. Principal asset, the jewels and the tiara itself. But as we've already discussed, aside from hardening the glass or the material that they're directly behind, the jewels themselves or the tiara itself being in a separate safe in the back of the building, not a bad idea. It is technically behind, well, at least one locked door, its own. But if we had more doors, it's technically below a couple of layers of barriers that someone has to get through. And it's usually in the office with the security officer. So it's not overall horrible. That is the general guideline. Whatever your principal asset, your highly valued jewel is, it needs to be underneath several layers of protection. And if your intent is to sell and get rid of that, then it needs to be really only shown to very deliberate customers or with the security presence there at all times. You don't want to just throw this down on the showroom floor. It, again, is your principal asset. So unless you're providing the necessary security, not a good idea to do Response capabilities. We see that with the officers on site that they do respond, and that's actually quite a bit of security officers on a small site for that. For granted, given the condition of the world, that's not entirely impossible that they would ramp it up to multiple armed guards. And the response of the police officers is pretty quick, which tells us that they're getting there quickly. We would also want to get in touch with fire department and EMS to see what their approximate response time for that area is, or to see where the local, what do you call that? It's like fire precinct or your local EMTs are camped out at, whatever, I can't think of the name of it, that little base station that EMTs use, wherever those guys are. That way you can give a general calculation of how long it would take for an EMS response or a fire response or something like that. That would be something we would do on the security assessor side. Not something we see in the universe, so don't think that's a worry that we have at the moment. As far as digital resistance, we know that the building can be compromised by the ECM jammers. These type of jammers are a real thing in the world. There's a lot of different capabilities whenever it comes to electronics. IT guys, you're going to have to speak on that. That's not my specialty. I do have a few credentials there, but that's not my specialization. But something like a clicker that can disrupt Wi-Fi or Bluetooth signals or just your lower radio signals, such as like car alarms and stuff, these can technically compromise your systems. Whenever it comes to security cameras, though, those are generally hard-lined in, and a jammer is not, a remote jammer as displayed in game is not really going to do it, because they're not doing any type of outward signal. These are all hard-lined and direct signals into their internal infrastructure, we'll say. It's one of the benefits to hardwiring everything is it's a lot harder to compromise. If you do use Wi-Fi based camera systems, which a lot of people do, just know that those can be compromised by Wi-Fi based systems as well. And I think that is all we have immediately for an assessment on the Ukrainian Job jewelry store. As all the episodes that we've done so far, this is going to be the most applicable to everyday Joes and basically what might you be considering. And if you are applying this entertaining and very fictional assessment to your real world needs, understand that real world needs are unique too. Even though we do provide that service and we're kind of treating this fictional rendition therein, these are not one and the same. Looking through the lens of a fictional universe is not the same as looking through the lens of the real threats that are out there in the world. However, going out, reading, learning, interpreting that type of stuff is a great way to find out the best way to protect yourself, your family, and your loved ones, and your investments as well, against different threats. But in the event you can't, be it you don't have the time or the energy to invest into that, that's fine. That's where nerds like me come along who really enjoy security, and we can help you harden that facility a little bit better. Now, overall, what do I rate this specific facility as relying on? Such as, are they primarily based on response, so alarms and observation? Well, no, because they also have security officers on site. Passive, just general design of the building? No, because again, they got guards on site and other immediate response capabilities. Active? Yes. They actually have a really strong security presence in the sense of physical security, officers on site. So they would lean more towards active, but they also have a very fast response and good general passive design. So overall, I'd probably put it mostly middle, but leaning a little bit more towards an active security presence. That's all that we have for the Ukrainian Job jewelry store within the game Payday 2. Any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to drop them down below.
Shithead's dead.
Taser got a fucking power out.
Punk ass shield.
Быстро я!